Okay, so I'm going to start admitting folks. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to hang out for a little while longer and wait for everyone else to join us virtually. Judy, can you hear me okay? Okay. I did.
I unmuted myself. That helps.
Welcome, Judy. Welcome, David.
Thanks.
Just waiting for a few more people to come. We had a change at the very last moment. Mayor's office liaison Joshua had to join us through Zoom. So we're just going to see if he pops in here in the next second before we start. And a little announcement for those that probably, obviously they can't hear me. Our Facebook Live link is not working for whatever reason. It's a technical difficulty that we are not able to solve right at this moment, unless somebody's a guru.
Facebook Live might be beyond my capabilities.
Okay, it looks like the fire, is that fire coming up the stairs? Okay, well, my name is Christina Robb, and I'm the chair of East Liberty Park Community Organization. And we are excited to start our March community meeting with our folks from the Salt Lake City Fire Department. They just walked in the door, so we're just going to turn the time over to them right away.
Oh my goodness.
Welcome, everyone.
Hi, thanks for having us. We have a pretty short message and then we'll get out of your hair. We've got our community newsletter that we're just gonna fill a few parts of and the messages and we'll be on our way.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the first part is from our chief. He talked about how it's still cold. I mean, it's technically spring, but we're having snowstorms and a lot of cold. So he just gave some tips on how to stay warm. Talked about wearing layers, making sure you stay hydrated. Something that's important to us is that people know how to properly heat their homes. So sometimes when it gets really cold, people will try to find other methods that aren't safe, lighting fires in properly in their homes or opening their ovens. So he talks about how you can go to warming centers or the library or other places if you need to get warm. He also recommends checking on people that you know may need help, older people in your neighborhood, grandparents, or what have you, that may need that extra help, because sometimes their bodies can't maintain the warmth as well, and it's just good to check on them because they might be slow to call for help. That's his main message, is just keeping track of other people and making sure we stay safe and
Great.
stay warm. Yeah.
Sounds like a great message. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So how's business in our neighborhood? Hopefully not too good.
I've got you on and you're like my plant. You're like, is all this available for $49.95? Wait, there's more. We will. I'm gonna go over all of our run totals at the very end.
Okay.
So if you don't mind holding that question, we will go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we're concerned along those lines as well is with all the snow that came, along with the winter. And I'm sure you guys have heard about it, but we're worried about potential flooding if, it warms up dramatically. So they also talked about, pre-construction of sandbags, and that you can do that as well. There's a lot of information on ready.gov. If anybody wants to look there, there's a lot of resources there that they can look that in. And then if needed, they're, just to evacuate immediately if, that came out. Just be aware that that could happen and to actually evacuate if we needed you guys to. Contact your health provider if you're sick and need medical attention along with that. Listen to the weather radio, and the reporting system, come along with TVs, stuff like that. Be on the lookout for that. Don't walk or drive through any of the flood waters if that did come. Stay off bridges over fast moving water, and it can sweep you away without any warning. Stay inside your car if you are trapped, and call 911. Let's see. And get to the highest level if you are trapped in a building. Only get to the roof if necessary, and you can signal for help from there but only if that's necessary. So just those are just some tips coming up in case we do need any of that. So
Great. And the website is ready.gov.
yep, ready.gov has some resources on there.
Great. I'll put that in our chat for everyone listening.
Perfect.
And also it looks like Be
Your
Ready
time's up, so anyway.
SLC is another place that you can go.
Is it Be Ready SLC?
Yeah, BeReadySLC.com.
We received some information from Salt Lake City that they were giving out up to 10 free sandbags at the warehouse.
Mhm.
Is that still happening?
That's still happening as of this morning.
Okay, great. And we'll give you some more information about that as well.
All set.
Yeah, and then it's just the one. So.
Okay, perfect. So, just for some context, we keep getting busier and busier as a department year over year. It's going anywhere from 5 to 10% a year. So total, all of your Salt Lake City Fire Department units had a total of 36,000 calls in last year, 2022. And we are your local station, Medic Engine 5. And as you folks probably are aware, we have a number of fire cases. We respond to both. You actually see our patches. We're actually certified and licensed to do that as well. So looking at February totals, our local station here at 62 fire responses. So, more than about 2 a day, and 146 medical cases for a total of 433 calls in February. So we stay pretty busy.
It is busy. And you said it was going up.
Yeah, it increases year over year, anywhere about 5%. Sometimes it's as much as 10%. Yeah, we're always getting busier. Used to do all the time. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you. I guess the question I always like to ask is, does anyone in the room have any questions for the fire department?
Yeah, you mentioned, you say warming centers?
Yeah,
Where would those be? Like where?
they change, but they will just set them up. I don't think there's any open right now.
Okay.
Because it's actually a homeless shelter
Right, okay, 'cause
overflow area.
I know the youth homeless shelter, they're trying to pass something so that if there's like a really bad storm, they can actually have more capacity than like what is the
On
limit.
fire code.
Yeah, and so
Like an
they're
overflow.
trying- what is it?
Like an overflow.
Yeah, so I was just saying if that's like what you meant, like the homeless shelters usually. Okay.
Yeah, like the Wiegand Center that's on 4th South and 4th West.
Mhm.
That's not, I think technically a homeless shelter, but a warming center. They sometimes
Okay.
will let people sleep there, but that's kind of more of a warming center where people can get food and get warm and get some help.
Yeah, okay.
But
okay.
not necessarily technically a shelter.
Awesome.
And just to be clear, we're okay if winter stops. That is the official.
We are
policy.
too.
Okay, that's kind of in a nutshell.
I want to just make sure though that I make a connection here for you all, that this is Kimberly from NeighborWorks.
Oh,
We're
yes.
happy to have her today.
Hi.
She's going to be joining us. We're going to collaborate on some housing issues, but I also wanted to stress that there's been a lot of information coming from to the city from the legislative updates. And are you guys familiar with the new Code Blue information that's related to temperature and wind chill that they've put in effect.
Right, so I think that's what I was.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I couldn't quite remember, but
Right.
yeah, the code blue.
Yeah, so that goes across all of our homeless resource centers, as well as, the warming centers that are in place, like the Wiegand Center, but also for any pop-up homeless centers that need to happen, like to happen at Central City Recreational Center this winter. So look for more information in that arena, and we'll present on that a little bit more clearer at a later date. But thank you guys.
Perfect.
for
Well, thanks for
coming.
having us.
Yeah.
Let me actually see if anybody out there has anything. Anybody in Zoom have any questions? Raise your hands or go ahead and put it in the chat. It looks like I don't see anything. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks for your time. Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Bye.
Welcome aboard. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for your time.
Likewise.
All right, so next on our agenda is Detective Follows. Next, I want to introduce Detective Follows from the Salt Lake City Police Department. He is our community and he is our CI officer who helps us every month with our crime reports and gives us an update on public safety. We've asked him here tonight to do a little bit more of an extensive, little bit more of a deep dive into some of the questions that the ELPCO board and that we're getting for community members. So I'll just let you take it away.
Yeah, if I talk to just start with them.
It should, yeah, there you are. Yeah.
Okay, it's good to be here with everybody tonight. As Christina stated, I'm Detective Sam Fallows. I'm your community liaison detective. So essentially, I kind of help try and connect the community with resources for kind of more issues that our patrol can't necessarily handle right away. So if, I've got different resources that we can talk about. And so one of the things that I do for my job is come to these meetings and talk about the statistics for the area, and then of course take questions. So if anybody has any questions online, if you'll put them in the chat while I'm talking, and then we can kind of get to them when I'm done with the presentation here. So before I get to the questions that the board had, I'll go over the statistics for the month. We always look at the previous months. This is for February of 2023 for the ELPCO area. We had 26 total Part 1 and Part 2 crimes reported to the Salt Lake City Police Department during that time frame. So our Part 1 and Part 2 crimes come anything from aggravated assaults to burglaries to homicides to minor things like, stolen property and vandalism. So we, the city keeps all these statistics on our website, which can be found just slcpd.com. I'm going to go ahead and throw up some
Do you want me
links in
to
the chat.
share the?
Oh no, I'll just put it right in the chat
Okay.
for everybody.
Mhm.
I'll throw that up there for you real quick and then over this month's. So we had 26 total crimes reported to us in the month of February. The ones we see the most kind of ELPCO area are usually property related crimes are the top ones. So we did see a pretty big decrease in larceny and theft calls. So we went from 15 in January to 5 in February. So that's a good thing. Our motor vehicle thefts is one I want to cover. They did go down from last month. We had 2 in the month of February. But we are seeing an uptick across the city in, oddly enough, motor vehicle thefts with fobs left in the vehicles. That seems to be an uptick. I don't know. If you have an extra fob, and sometimes people, I've been guilty of doing this myself, by accident. If you have an extra key or an extra fob leaving your vehicle, take it out at the end of the day, or, if you're going into a store or something like that, don't leave it in there. Like I said, for whatever reason, we're having an uptick in those types of motor vehicle thefts. So you think it'd be like warming during this time of the year, but this is actually outpacing warming vehicles right now. So just be aware of that. And then that goes back to the same thing that I like to talk about all the time is like, make sure we're taking anything of value out of our vehicles that's visible, or at least putting it away, locking it into the glove box, locking it in the trunk. do anything you can to not make it an easy target for someone who's just, going car to car, looking at what they can get into, so. So yeah, larceny theft was one of the top ones. We saw. We do get some assaults, not very many. We had 2 reported in February. If that's something you're seeing happening in progress, you're welcome to call 911 and let us know about that. The police department, obviously. If you're a victim of assault, please call us. We can come out and help you with that. So, or if you just want to duke it out with someone and leave it at that, that's up to you. It's mutual combat. So it's Utah. We do have mutual combat, but up to you. But yeah, so those are the numbers for the month of February. And then I do want to just go over for any of the businesses. We have our trespass affidavit program. I've been trying to kind of go over this in each community council to remind everyone. So our trespass affidavit is a really awesome program we have here at Salt Lake City. Essentially what it is you as a business owner, and homeowners can also take advantage of this as well. If you live, it would probably work best if you lived like maybe on an alleyway or something like that, where you might get people that are camping and things like that in the little alcove where your garage might be. So business or homeowners can utilize this program, but essentially what you do is you fill out an affidavit, which is a legal document that states that the police department has your permission to remove anyone on the property who should not be there. The reason this is important is because the Salt Lake City prosecutor requires one of 2 things for us to be able to make an arrest on trespassing alone, not other things, but just trespassing. We either have to have a previously documented trespass warning and a police report with the individual. So if Sam Fowles is trespassing on your property, the police come out, and you do not have the trespass affidavit, then we will do a report and document it and send them on their way. And then let's say I come back the next day, then I am able to make an arrest as the police department, if it's the same individual with a documented police report. With the trespass affidavit, you'll purchase a Salt Lake City no trespass sign. It goes with the affidavit. They just sell them at cost to the city. And our officers are trained to look for those specific city issued signs. With that, we were able to make an immediate arrest. There doesn't have to be any kind of previous trespass warning. That is considered the previous trespass warning. So I've had a lot of success with it. Just one case to highlight real quick. Our bike unit, the East Side Bike Unit, who patrols obviously Liberty Park and ELPCO and all the surrounding neighborhoods and areas. They witnessed some individuals that were literally camping underneath a no trespass sign. So it didn't work to like get them out, because sometimes that works as well, where people see that they know that the police department can come and stop them legally. And so sometimes they don't trespass because they don't want to get stopped by the police. These individuals did not, but they were proactively out looking. They were able to make a stop on the individual, and ended up being one of our robbery suspects from the case that we were able to close out because we made that arrest. So very good, very helpful especially for like any of our specialty units that are trying to do the on-view work, or like when we see something in progress that we don't have to, that someone doesn't call in. So it helps with that kind of stuff quite a bit. So I always like to highlight that. Any questions on the statistics or the trespass signs before we move on? From anyone
in the room?
You had a big decline in larcenies, I think you mentioned. Did you have the sense that you caught somebody who had been doing that, or?
I would have to dive into our deeper stats for that. I'm not 100% sure why that number went down it did go down pretty significantly. So
Interesting.
Yeah. And I can look into that. I don't have that with me right now.
I'm just curious.
But yeah, it could be. We have those, and so actually our city does track those. We call them hotspot locations, and we do track those as well. And we have absolutely seen that, where we'll take a couple of key players out and arrest them, and all of a sudden the burglaries and the thefts go down like sometimes to nothing. So yeah, that very well could be the case. I think sometimes it goes a little underreported. I think even 15 is probably less than what's really going on.
Right.
So I do want to highlight that as well, actually, something I do want to talk about. If you wake up and it's just a simple like, oh my gosh, my kid's bike was stolen out of the front yard and I have no clue who did it. If you want to take just a couple of seconds to go online and just do a quick online report for a theft, it'll take you probably 5 to 10 minutes. And what it does is it kind of helps make a little blip on the map for us, or a pin in the map for us as a police department. And it's for me in my position where I can kind of pull the statistics in the neighborhood, look at what's going on and get kind of a more accurate picture. And then that helps me be able to drive resources, because then I can You know, hit up our bike units and our different kind of units and say, hey, we're having issues here. Like, there's sometimes where like we had enough bike thefts in a neighborhood where I'll get with the property crimes unit and they'll do like a bike theft up.
Mhm.
But I can't do that if I don't have numbers to show them, like, hey, we're having a major issue in this neighborhood, you know, so. I realize that sometimes, you know, especially on the lower level crimes, Salt Lake City can take a while to respond. I sympathize with that 100%. I would not want to sit around for hours just to report my kid's bike against someone, but if you can go online and do it for me, it counts the exact same way. It still counts as a statistic for the neighborhood and helps me to be able to kind of drive those resources where I need them to go.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, before we move on from that, I want to make a couple of comments. I'm gonna quickly just add some more people from the waiting room. Hello, everyone that's joining us from the waiting room right now. We're with Detective Sam Fellows from the Salt Lake City Police Department. So welcome to the meeting. So the comment I wanted to make is what we generally do is remind everyone at these meetings to utilize the Salt Lake City mobile app as much as you need to in order to let the city know about these kind of things, because as Detective Follows just said, these are statistically driven things that, you know, he needs our help to help us, something to keep in mind. But I think what we also talk about is make sure to call 911 if you need it. And the mobile app is not a place to put a police report online. So just make sure that you realize the difference in what Detective Falls is talking about. And I also wanted to say one thing that's been happening a lot lately is we've been seeing some connections on Nextdoor. And there was a recent hotspot of car break-ins on 900 East in the 900 9th and 9th area.
Okay.
Did you happen to see that bleep in the statistics, or?
I would have to look up that specific spot, because when we pull the numbers, it just got pulled for the whole entire
Yeah, that's
area.
right.
So I could look up that specific area and see, but,
Well, again, we can do that at some other point. I just wanted to point this out as something that's really useful to me and to other people who are working in the community councils. When we start to see those patterns on Nextdoor, just kind of randomly, just, you know, I don't follow Nextdoor that closely, but it does occur to me when I see a pattern to contact the police department and ask them what's happening. So the more, you know, you all help us help them, the more traction we can get in these kind of, you know, making connections and working together. So any other questions?
well, just quick point about Nextdoor, because it's really good point.
Uh-huh.
We don't monitor Nextdoor as like a way to track crime statistics, so if you're putting on Nextdoor, but you haven't done an online report or you haven't called us, then reverse that process and make a report first and call us. Because Nextdoor is a great tool to let your neighbors know, like, hey, there's some package theft going around, a thief going around
Mhm.
stealing packages, you know, but if we don't know about it, then nothing is gonna get done, you know, about it. So we have to know about it. And we do not track any kind of statistics from Nextdoor. It's gotta be a police report. So,
That's great.
yeah,
Good
super,
information.
super important.
Okay, great. Okay, so you want to move on to part 2 then of your
Absolutely.
presentation?
Yep, for sure. So, do you wanna go over the questions, or you want me to kind of dive into it?
Why don't you just dive into it? I'll introduce. So when we were trying to decide how to put together a public safety meeting, our board just threw out some ideas that they thought were interesting. And we are going to have Sim Gill, the Salt Lake County District Attorney, always walking in the door right now, here a little later in the meeting. So we decided to give the police department some more space on the agenda to talk about these questions that were presented. So rather than just going over the questions, the detective has put together a little presentation, and we'll just hear them out and then open it to questions.
Perfect. So one of the topics of interest that came up was, obviously we know that, like, from 2020, there was the riots and a lot of psychologically difficult things that officers and a lot of us, even citizens that were down there during that time, that we all had to go through during that time frame. The DA's office, I think everybody went through a lot of crazy stuff between May and July of 2020. So one of the questions that kind of came up was like, what has Salt Lake City done for officer wellness? Which is a really good question, and I'm happy to report that like Salt Lake City has taken that pretty serious. Just a quick background on me: I have worked for 5 different police departments total, 4 in the Salt Lake County and then 1 in Las Vegas. And I've been here just about 5 years now. And I will say, first and foremost, Salt Lake City is probably by far the department that has taken the most steps towards officer wellness and making sure that their officers have resources and are taken care of mentally and emotionally. So for any department that I've worked for, Salt Lake City has done the best so far, for sure. And so some of the things that we have for our police department is we have 3 full-time employees that are assigned to the peer support. 2 are sworn police officers, and then 1 is a full-time on-site clinician that we have that can help with like getting us into counseling or things like that. The 2 full-time detectives their job is kind of dual, where they do like a peer support thing, which is, peer support can come into contact with an officer, whether it be for something as simple as like family issues at home, or if they get into a shooting on duty, or some kind of a officer involved critical incident or something like that on duty. Peer support will get involved and be the emotional support side of all that stuff that goes on. So we have 3 full-time for that, and then we have about an additional 20. I think they're trying to add quite a few more, but right now I think we have between 20 and 25 what we call collateral or like part-time officers that do the peer support as well. So anytime an officer is going through that kind of stuff, they can reach out to them. There's been recent legislation, I believe, about like peer support and their role in like being able to, obviously not anything that's like criminal, but like being able to kind of like on a very low level, like a therapist, where you could tell them things and they, as long as it's not criminal or something that, could be a danger to the community, then they're able to kind of keep that confidential and stuff. So that's one major step that Salt Lake City has done, is they've created a full-time wellness program, which we did not have before. So that's been really cool to see. And it's been utilized quite a bit. They do everything from like wellness yoga every Wednesday to, they just do a lot of different stuff to try and like,
We need
reach.
photos.
Yeah. Just to reach a full array of different officers. And, nowadays with like all the hiring and stuff, you get just a broad array of people and backgrounds and ages, and so you get in from like 21-year-olds coming into law enforcement to, you get people that are restarting in life and coming in at like 40s and stuff. So it's a really good program that they've created. So that's a major thing that really kicked up since the 2020 riots and everything for officer wellness. So that was the main thing. Did I cover that topic? Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Does everybody like hearing about this?
Yeah.
Okay, well, go on.
Yeah. So another topic of interest was like our department staffing members, kind of along with the officer wellness. I think it was pretty common knowledge, like Salt Lake City lost quite a few officers between like 2020 and 2021. So that incident of itself is a little bit different than most departments, but right now across the country, probably across the world, every department is having issues with hiring enough people. I think that's probably every industry right now, not just public safety. But for Salt Lake City, we're doing okay. We are slotted for 597 officers in our city, which includes the airport division. Right now, currently, we are down 39 officers currently. So we have come back quite a bit from what we were down before, which is good, right? We're constantly hiring. There's constantly having people retiring, things like that. So it's kind of this constant number that kind of fluctuates now and again. But right now, we're kind of around that 39 to 40 officer range of what we're trying to put on. And I know that they're doing an academy class in May, and I believe they're doing another one in September. I feel bad for our training unit because they are just hammering out academy classes left and right. So, yeah, kudos to them because they've been doing a lot of work. So that is where we're at with our department staffing numbers. Obviously, if anybody's interested, you know anyone that's interested, we're always looking for qualified candidates to come work for us. From all backgrounds, all different kinds of life experience. You can start law enforcement when you're 21 years old, and it's a great career. So, and then the last topic of interest is why do people get released from jail so fast? That's a pretty difficult question to answer, and it's a very broad. Maybe I'll have Mr. Gillen.
Can I actually preface this before we move on? So, so this question is something that we actually took directly off of Nextdoor, because that was something that we see over and over and over in those comments, not just for ELPCO, but just across the broader Salt Lake metropolitan area. So, I'll ask the question, especially with property crimes, the issue comes up a lot that they finally get the person with low-level crimes like property crimes caught, but then they're out committing the same crimes. And I'm sure the statistics for higher level crimes, you probably have these statistics somewhere, but this particular question was about property crimes. So you can speak to both if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll try and answer this the best I can. Like
Yeah.
I said, it's a pretty complicated question to answer. The reason it's so complicated is there's a lot of players when it comes to jail releases. It's not just the police department's fault, or it's not just the district attorney's fault, or it's not just the jail's fault. It's not just, there's a lot of players that come into, or things that come into play when someone is released from jail. So just like every other police department, number one, the jail is short staffed, just like everybody, right? And so, probably one of the main reasons that people get released is because of overcrowding, understaffed issues with the jail. So property crimes is a lower level crime compared to like an aggravated assault or a domestic violence case or something like that. So the jail sometimes has to make those decisions of like, who are we going to keep in jail? But they only have so much room, they only have so much staff. So it's kind of a crazy thing to think about or think about in those terms, but that's just the reality. So sometimes people can get released because of, like we said, overcrowding or understaffing in the jail. Other time, there's another service in jail called pretrial services that also can release someone. Just based on, they take a lot of things into account on when they release someone, but it's gonna be based on like bail and whether the individual has like a extensive record and what kind of crime is committed, whether it's violent or not, like all those things get taken into account as well. And that's another way that someone could get out of jail. And it is, if it's a nonviolent crime, or even if it's a violent crime, but they're able to post their bail, they're able to get out of jail. That's just how society works, right? Like, if they can post the bail, they are able to get out of jail. That's just kind of how society works. So that's another way. And then the third way, which is less common, is what we call like a fail to file with the police department. If the police department isn't able to file the charges quick enough with the district attorney's office, I believe you have 48 hours. Is that correct?
Yeah, 48 to 72 hours.
Yeah, 48 to 72 hours to get the charges screened with the district attorney's office. Then the jail has to release the individual. So that can happen sometimes. Generally, it's the overcrowding and the pretrial services is the main. So that's the best way. I know how to answer that question. Like I said, it is a complicated question. Maybe.
Yeah, I can, if you want me to, I can supplement that if you'd like me to.
Okay, well, welcome for everybody out there in Zoom land. We have our district attorney, Sim Gill, at the table. He just walked in, so we're going to take advantage of him right now.
So the other part of this is that on low-level offenses, when the officer books them in, and that's after pretrial services does a risk needs assessment. So it's a validated tool that they will use. And within that context, then also, even before the case gets even uploaded, there's a judge who can look at it and make that decision for that release. So there are two forces. There are multiple forces. One force is the assessment that's done by pretrial services. The other one is the judge who may also validate and allow that person to be released as well. There have been situations where we've identified specific individuals that we work with law enforcement who are committing low-level offenses, and we've actually done both probable cause statements as well as making a request for that person to be held where the court has released that person. The other part of it is to keep in mind, we are, although COVID is over in one sense, in terms of the emergent issue of it, we also had a backlog of cases. So we knew that at that time when COVID happened, that there was going to be a drop in services as people were trying to understand. So the focus was on violent crime. So we purposely reduced our jail population from about 2,100 down to 1,100 of the most violent, to make room for the violent offenders. To give you a context right now, I'm gonna give you some round numbers. So we have somewhere like 290 individuals, 95 individuals who are there on sex offenses that we're holding to prosecute. And I have 350 people who we have convicted of sex offenses who the court didn't send to prison, but are doing jail time. And so you can see that one set of a subset of a population is almost 700 prisoners who are there. Then you add to it just the volume of violent offenses in terms of who are considered a risk to our community. And so when we look at the jail dashboard, anybody can go and take a look at the jail dashboard. You'll notice the largest number of people, which is the right thing to do, which is we're holding first-degree felons, which are the most serious offenders, second-degree felons, which are the next category, and then third-degree felons, and very few Class A misdemeanors and others in terms of, and that number has been going back up towards 2,100. So Chief Domont will give his monthly sort of updates to the meetings that I go to, and that number is starting to push up. So remember, violent crime didn't stop, and we didn't want those violent criminals to be out there. So those jail beds that were there have been occupied by them. Now, having said that, of course, what we try to focus on is that if they're non-violent offenders, if they're given the opportunity to come back, and if they don't show up, then we request for a warrant. That's the process. Our justice court judges, which is our lowest level of court, will issue a warrant for somebody not showing up. But when the law enforcement acts upon that, here's where our system is a little broken, is that law enforcement will act upon it, book them on the warrant, but it is the same court that releases them. So if you have an incident that happens in the community, law enforcement responds, they may not have good ID, or they may have some history, and they will actually take them and book them at the jail. That person is released, the citation, because all Class A, below Class A's are done by a citation. That citation gets uploaded. So the justice court would then look to see if the person shows up in court. If they don't show up in court, they'll issue an arrest warrant. Now, you would assume that if that arrest warrant was executed upon, they would hold them. But since they're a low level, before we can even get them to be held, the court, the justice court judge or pretrial services has already released them. So it creates this kind of a really kind of a weird loop, if you will, in terms of the systemic flaw that we have. But then there's also the operational capacity issue, which is, remember, we have a limited number of jail beds. And so we are now we have done a pretty good job of working those cases, which were the violent offenders that we've held on from COVID. So remember, court operations closed down. The volume of cases that we would normally move through adjudication slowed down tremendously, right? Over the last 3.5, 4 years, right now, I have 165 open active homicides that we are prosecuting. That's not in 1 year, so I don't want to alarm anybody. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an aggregation over the last 3.5 years, because we've had to hold them because of slowed court processes, but those cases started to queue up against them. And all those murder folks, we are holding, we're not releasing them, right? So these are the things that are contributing to that. And so as we continue to normalize operations, we will try to process some of those individuals to open up some of those jail beds. But we also have to recognize the systemic challenge of low-level offenses, especially property-related offenses, and the challenge that we have with pretrial services and the court. So that's sort of the answer. It's not a complete, perfect answer, but that gives you a description of what is going on.
Well, I mean, that is very informative. I mean, it's very interesting to hear the details of that in the depth that you presented here. I think I'm gonna have to rewind this video multiple times to keep up with that. But, you know, I'd like to thank you, you know, Officer Fellows, for doing that presentation, because it really did set us up nicely for, you know, getting this extra information. I couldn't have planned that better.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really excited. Does anybody in the room have any specific questions that they'd like to ask, Detective Fellows? And then maybe we'll wait for our questions for, Mr. Gill until after his presentation, if that works. Anyone? How about anyone out there? Does anybody want to ask questions from our virtual link?
Easy tonight.
Silence.
I did such a good presentation.
Covered this issue so well that there are no questions. No, but really, very impressive. I'm proud of you. I know that was a big ask. So we really appreciate you for doing that. Did you want to hang out or you?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, well, in that note, I'm going to introduce Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill.
Well,
Welcome.
Thank you, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity and the privilege to come and meet with you. Wanted to come down for a couple of reasons, one of which is this year we're making a concerted effort. There are multitudes of community councils in Salt Lake County as a body, and we're making an effort to reach out personally. I'm gonna go to every single one of those community councils and make that personal contact for a couple of reasons. First of all, the principles of our democracy are best served by all of you. You guys are community members, you're interested in your community, you have genuine issues, and you're involved. You're here taking time out of your time to spend time to be a part of this questions. You have questions, you have issues that you want to talk about. And I think it's really important as the Salt Lake County District Attorney to make myself personally accessible to you. And also, my title is I'm the Salt Lake County DA, which represents the entire county with 1.3 million people. But I also am the Salt Lake City prosecutor, which some of you may not know. So through an interlocal agreement, I brought the Salt Lake City prosecutor's office into our office, both for economies of scale and the consolidation of these two offices. And so roughly, the DA's office will screen approximately 17,000 cases annually. Those are all Class A to first-degree felons. That means that where the punishment is from a 1 year to death penalty or life, right? So we prosecute all of those cases in every municipality in Salt Lake County. With Salt Lake City, we will screen and file because those are done by citation. We will screen and file probably about 15,000 cases. So between our two combined offices, to give you an idea of what that represents, roughly approximately 40% of all crime in the state of Utah will be prosecuted by our office. That is our footprint. We have roughly about 350 employees altogether, about 140 of which are attorneys. Most of everybody thinks about both of these offices as primarily focused on criminal prosecution, and you would be right. But as a matter of introduction, and let me also say, I am also the Salt Lake County attorney. What does that mean? That means that Salt Lake County government is a $1.8 billion corporation, and I am the in-house legal counsel to that $1.8 billion corporation. So I have approximately another 26 attorneys whose job is to do nothing but to represent Salt Lake County as a political subdivision. We are legal counsel for the mayor. We're legal counsel for every other independent elected. We handle everything from ordinances to contracts and procurement. We sue and prosecute civil litigation on behalf of Salt Lake County. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One example is the opioid litigation. We filed on behalf of Salt Lake County because we're the largest county. When the opioid crisis hit us nationally, it also impacted us. And so we're part of that litigation specifically on behalf of Salt Lake County. And just most recently, as this litigation continues to move forward, we've got approximately $57 million on behalf of Salt Lake County as part of that ongoing national settlement that is occurring. And that money is 57 million separate from the state part, 57 million that is going to come directly to be put into treatment into Salt Lake County, right? Another example is that we are right now currently in litigation with Volkswagen of America for changing their emission standards of those that allowed for pollution to occur, because we believe that was had a collateral consequence on us. We've also sued the state for unfair tax policy. When centrally assessed taxation with Delta happened, it passed $10 million in unfair tax liability to the citizens of Salt Lake County. We sued, and we have to come back on that, but I give you those as some of those illustrative examples of what our office does. Our approach with the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office is that I have taken what I call a therapeutic justice model approach. I helped start the very first mental health court in the state of Utah almost 21 years ago. So when mentally ill people are intersecting with the criminal justice system, it puts an unfair burden on our law enforcement partners in our community. And instead of simply warehousing them, we said we should actually see for those who we can wrap those services around and get them the medical helps that we need. And the data from that has been historically incredibly compelling. People who are mentally ill, who are intersecting with the criminal justice system, recidivate or violate at approximately 74%. But if they participate through our mental health court, which is almost a 3-year commitment, we can reduce that recidivism rate down to 19 to 22% while wrapping medical support around those individuals. Another way to think about this is these are individuals who are acute mentally ill, but for mental health court, almost 85 to 95% of them would have ended up in prison, because nobody's getting up in the morning to say, let me see what crimes I can commit. Often the criminal activity is the byproduct of their mental illness. Over the last 21 years, instead of sending almost 2,000 people to prison, we have probably sent about 150, and without compromising public safety. We also are huge supporters of drug courts. We have one of the largest drug court programs in the state, which is run here. We reduced recidivism rate from 70% down to about 23 to 24%. Another program that we started is Veterans Court. We saw the intersection of our veterans who were going down, who were suffering from PTSD, coming back into our community. Their social relationships were eroding. They were self-medicating with illicit drugs. They were finding themselves homeless. And we created the first Veterans Court almost 7 years ago, and it has been nationally recognized. And we partner with VA, so we're not double dipping into our limited resources, because I have federal dollars that are available to us, and we're getting more continuity of treatment, and we're getting incredible results. And so therapeutic justice is an important part of our philosophy. But we do that because we want to peel off those individuals who need help out of the system, so we can focus more directly on those people who are a risk to our community in terms of violence, right? Because we do have limited resources, so we want to be able to target strategically on those resources with those individuals. Another component of our work that we're doing is that we know that as public prosecutors, that we see individuals who come through, and there's incredible trauma for victims and witnesses who go through that. So for the first time in the history of the office, about 3 years ago, but just as COVID hit, we created the first ever standalone co-equal division in the district attorney's office called the Victim Support Services Division. It's one of the largest divisions that I have. There's almost about 40 people there. There's not a single prosecutor. It's staffed by MSW, LCSW, as well as victim advocates separate from that. So we're providing both trauma care to victims as well as direct court support. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that we have also recognized that many of the victims of trauma were children. And we were prosecuting both child abuse cases, child sexual abuse cases, and historically a prosecutor would prosecute the case, thank them for their courage, and then we would move on to the next case. But when we looked at the research, we also saw that trauma left unaddressed manifests itself as intergenerational trauma that's passed on from family to family. And then we see their manifestation in criminal behavior. So we actually created a very innovative program. It's called Camp Hope. We're not out there to change the world, but all the children who are victims and are witnesses or victims of trauma, we created a summer camp fully funded by the district attorney's office, which is staffed, a week-long summer camp, which is staffed by trauma-informed counselors, and to start to give them their childhood back, because research shows that children are the most impactful for the purposes of trauma. And if you can impact them, then they can transition out of these traumatic situations. But we didn't just want to do once and done. So we make a 3-year commitment with these children, and we take them to, and we're going to be going into our 3rd year of summer camp this year. And our first year, we took roughly 66 children from the ages of 7 to 17. Last year, we took almost 70 some odd children. This year, we're probably going to take close to 80 or 90 children. So we're doing that summer camp for them. But then also, we know that trauma also impacts their social behavior, their academic behavior. So we have our pathway program. So we also are providing support services to these children every month through our pathways program, up to 3 years of a commitment. And we're already starting to see incredible positive results from that, because this will also not only help this child in crisis, but that family, but also be the disruptor for intergenerational passing of trauma. And so we're disrupting it in the future as well. And that's a program that I'm incredibly proud of. And this is not just a feel-good program. We partnered with the University of Oklahoma. So it's evidence-based, research-driven, and we're gathering data in a very thoughtful, direct way on impacting that stuff. And the other thing is, as we come and introduce ourselves to you as members of the community, the other thing that we want you to be aware of is that every Friday for 22 years, I have what are called citizens' hours. Any citizen can request, I set aside my Friday to meet with any citizen on any issue that they want to meet with. And if they want to come and yell at me, because that's their right, it's my privilege to listen. And my philosophy is very simple. Every citizen should feel connected and have access to their public institution, including me, not through a third-party intermediary. So if there are questions or concerns that you have, I would invite you to take advantage of that aspect as well. And then finally, the other thing that I'm very excited about, we were also one of the very first to introduce and create the first conviction integrity unit in the state. And the conviction integrity unit is, I have an incredible advisory board. Former Supreme Court Justice Christine Durham, who was the first woman Chief Justice in Utah when she retired. She now heads our Conviction Advisory Board. It had the former Judge Judy Atherton. She just retired. She had retired, but she's just left. So Judge Sandra Fuller is going to take over. I have Gil Athay, who is the prominent defense attorney on there. Dave Schwendeman from the U.S. Attorney's Office, who was retired, as also Ms. Loveday, who's also our community member. And the purpose of this advisory board is to not only look at those wrongs that may have been done, but those procedural flaws that may have been institutionally done to individuals through the criminal justice system. They serve as an independent adjunct to the district attorney's office, and they review those cases when those applications come to us, and then they give me their recommendations about what to deal with that. So, for example, we had 2 juveniles who were many years ago convicted of drug charges, but as adults. So that was a wrong thing to do, because juveniles belong in juvenile court, not in adult court. So we vacated those previous convictions. And I give these as illustrative examples of the kind of work that we're doing. And I would encourage all of you, if you want to meet, to come down. And then finally, as we finish this year of making contact with each community council, our long-term vision is to invite representative from each community council to a gathering at the district attorney's office where we can then share with you as community councils both the proactive measures that we're taking, take your questions about that as establishing an ongoing dialogue at a granular level of citizens getting involved with this institution, which belongs to you. I'm just a temporary caretaker. So this is the effort that we're engaged upon, and that's what we're coming out and meeting and introducing ourselves, because we think that democracy belongs best and is represented at community level. And you guys who are taking the effort should have that direct access. So that's just an introduction. I will stop at this point and be happy to take any questions that you have. And but thank you for the privilege to come and to talk to you. I just want to introduce a couple of other people. Keith Chalmers, who's here, Nick Panseri, they're part of our community outreach aspect of this, and then Lieutenant Nodler, who's here from our office as well, from our investigations bureau as well. So I will pause at that moment, and I know that's a lot of information by way of introduction, but thank you for the privilege and opportunity to come and talk to you.
Great.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for that. And like I said, to everybody who's in the room and out there in our virtual meeting, that this meeting is being recorded and it is a lot of information. And I am really excited to go back and listen to it again. Can we take some questions from the room? You guys gotta have a question.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Yeah,
So,
Kimberly.
I'm from neighborhood work, Salt Lake,
Yeah.
and we deal with a lot of, troubled kids who have a lot of trauma from their families as well. I'm not entirely sure necessarily if they've gone through the court system, but would they be able to sign up if they have to go to that camp?
No, at this time. And the reason is that our goal is not to supplant community nonprofits and community organizations that whose job is to assist in that.
Right.
So what we're focusing on is their entry as victims or witnesses to trauma in the cases that we are prosecuting, right, for that, right? So our Victim Support Services Division provides support to those witnesses, those victims who are coming into that. Because we know that there are other organizations that are out in the community that are based there. So our goal was not to usurp them, but we recognize that there was a deficit within this population coming through it, right? But one of the other things we are doing is through our juvenile division, we are trying to actually reach out through a project to talk to juvenile members in the community. We are trying to create a program. It was used in LA County through the library system, and to try to reach out to youth in a proactive way. So if you have some youth that we could work with and you want us to participate, we'll certainly make ourselves available on an individual basis that way. But for that need, we're limited to just to what we're doing with those folks who are entering into the system.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions?
I had actually a couple of questions.
Please.
You described, and I'm going back to your earlier follow-up to Detective Fallow's answer on what's happening
Yeah.
with the lower level
Yeah.
criminals, shoplifting, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Does that revolving door sort of glitch that you described in the system, is that something that needs a legislative fix? Is that?
No, I think there's a couple of things. So let's take, for example, some of our most vulnerable at-risk population, because people have this imagery, for example, of homeless individuals, etc., right, who may be engaging in low-level offenses. And I'm going to use this as an illustrative example. So my experience over the last 27 years as a prosecutor, and I'm having very good conversations both with the Chief Brown, Mayor Mendenhall, Mayor Wilson. In fact, because of this challenge that we had, our office helped facilitate a trip to Miami, and you may have heard in the news the Miami model. So our office helped facilitate that by taking leadership, including leadership from the legislature from the business community and leadership within Salt Lake City, law enforcement, the sheriff, and Salt Lake County government. And the reason Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City is important because Salt Lake County has an infrastructure of social support services that most counties don't have. And in partnership with the city as the capital city. And my goal was to take everybody there to the Miami model, because over the years, I've seen people address it in fits and starts, but we never get it right. So the idea was for all of us to witness the same phenomena together. So when we came back as a group, we were talking and describing the same thing. So what I have identified and what some of the data from the police would identify, for example, in Salt Lake City, that there are probably about 90 to about 175 acute mentally ill individuals whose needs are not being met, but who eat up about 85% of our systemic response because of our failed policy. So the question then becomes, can we come up with smart strategies to focus on the needs of it? Law enforcement can only do so much. Prosecution can only do so much. And many of these individuals who need these wraparound services, because institutionally we're failing them, it can benefit best if we can get them off-ramped into those services rather than revolving through the criminal justice door, if you will. And the other thing is that sometimes people have this idea of all you have to do is prosecute them. But I'm talking about individuals whose mental health or substance abuse addictions are often co-occurring, because if you're poor and you don't have access to good medicine, illicit drugs are a poor man's medication of self-medicating. These individuals may not even possess the capacity. So prosecution will not achieve anything, because what they need is services, because even if I could bring them and hold them long enough, they don't possess either the competency or the capacity. So let me give you an example. In the public mindset, for example, if I use the phrase civil commitment, almost everyone here intuitively will think about civil commitment as a place, that if you civilly commit somebody, that they go somewhere and we give them services and support services. Well, here's the reality. Civil commitment isn't a place, it's a status. And it is a diagnosis, it's a conclusion that is made, but we don't have the infrastructure to provide the continuity of care where this person can go. And so it creates a very false narrative in the community. And my whole thing is, let's start having an honest conversation about this. Similarly, those who are even committing more serious offenses, when we talk about the state hospital has X number, a limited, I don't know, is that 150, 175 civil commitment beds. And they also may have a similar equivalent of 150 forensic beds. Those are individuals who are in the criminal justice system in need of it. Now, does anybody here really rationally think that in the state of Utah, with a population of about 3.34 million people, that I have only 250, 300 acute mentally ill people in the state? Of course not. We have more, so our infrastructure is lacking. And even when we talk about competency restoration, we think in a popular mind, restoration means, oh, they're getting the mental health services they need when we're addressing their mental health needs. Legal competency means that they just don't understand the court process. They don't understand their lawyer's role or the judge's role. And in some jurisdictions, not in Utah, but in other jurisdictions, some people have treated that by having people watch SVU reruns over and over again. And I use that as an example to illustrate how broken our system is. Because we, as a member of community of citizens, we think that we're actually doing something. We're actually giving them access to these services, but we are not, right? Now, to the more general part of your question, majority of the people, keep in mind, if there's about 17,000, 15,000 cases, majority of the individuals, if you give them a citation and you give them a time to appear in court, will come to court. And that issue is being addressed and appropriately. It is only a small subset of a population, which understandably draws our attention because they're in a state of crisis, and we as citizens are witnessing that. And if you're not feeling safe, if you're witnessing that, and law enforcement is revolving around that, then that's the most visible one, but that's the one historically and institutionally we have not fully supported. So as I say this, I don't want you to leave with doom and gloom. So here's what I am guardedly optimistic about. When I approached Mayor Mendenhall, when I approached Mayor Wilson and this community of people who are part of the social services network, my approach to them was that over my experience over 27 years, I can vividly recall between 12 to 14 distinct times where we have convened to address this issue over my 27 years. But we wring our hands, we create a committee, we come up with these wonderful ideas, but we don't execute on them. So my thing to them was, let us really have the honest conversation. Is there a political commitment to actually start to solve this problem? The other great thing that is going to be going online in a formal way in 2 years, but in a more smaller way, is the Huntsman Receiving Center. And why is that important? Because when law enforcement responds, instead of saying take them to prison, when somebody's in a crisis, they're going to be able to, because we want them to be focused on violent crime. But nonetheless, when you call 911, somebody, because there's a crisis, when they respond, they will be able to take this person to the receiving center. And at that point, they will be triaged medically and triaged from social services perspective. Then they can go very quickly back out into the field. But now that will be the off-ramp to wrap those services around them. And when the Huntsman Receiving Center goes online in 2 years as a fully functional thing, it will be a game changer for our community. So that's a very positive movement that we're moving in. They're already doing aspects of that. In fact, they're going to be going online in July 1 with that. My office has been in communication with them. Law enforcement, Salt Lake City has been there, and we're creating an opportunity for people to be brought into that. And it will, but the capacity it will have when it's formally built will be very different. They're doing it now. They will be July 1 is my understanding is when that launch date will occur on a more robust way. So that gives me hope vis-a-vis that population that is revolving through. The reason they're revolving through is because as a society, we don't have the infrastructure for support. I've developed a hypothesis, and I don't mean to offend anybody with this, but over the 27 years, my hypothesis goes as follows. When public policy makers fail to address the issue of social justice, economic justice, political justice, public health, education, affordable housing, those public policy deficits manifest themselves as crises in our community. And our public policy makers have historically looked to our criminal justice system, our law enforcement, and our criminal justice system to be our crisis managers. And that light bulb went off on me when I was a line prosecutor and I just convicted somebody, and I'm standing in front of the judge and I'm trying to figure out, where is this person going to sleep tonight? How are they going to get the medical services that they need? How are they going to take care of their mental health services? How are they going to be fed? Where are they going to get their vocational training? And so I can get them gainfully employed and into the transition in an affordable way. And every one of those things that I've mentioned is a public policy commitment upstream that we have not made. So what this receiving center does is for us to start an honest way recognizing that there's a subset of a population that can benefit from these services. And if they represent that 12 to 14% that are eating up 85% of our resources, you can imagine if we strategically invest our resources to that 12 to 14%, the systemic windfall is going to be dramatic and huge, right? So that gives me hope in terms of where we're going with this. But I will give you my word, that person who's a violent offender, now there is a breakdown. The breakdown is, which we're trying to reach to the Justice Court to say, look, when they're writing their probable cause statements, and I've told law enforcement, instead of having just giving a citation, let's identify those person who is causing that problem And I will screen those cases and file 3 or 4 cases and then ask for that person to be held. The one thing that I'm working with Judge Landau at Justice Court with is to create a very specific calendar for me where these individuals can then be taken to that calendar with one judge, with one set of prosecutors. So then once we can slow that person who does have capacity, or so it's not talking about those who don't have capacity, but may nonetheless need structure support and that prosecution to create that structure support, then we can start to look at this population in a concerted way. So Judge Landau at least has given me his word that he's willing to entertain that. And this will become part of that Miami model that we're all trying to execute upon. And finally, to also give the freedom to our law enforcement in the field that they can make field diversions into these social services rather than simply look to that. And then we focus law enforcement effort on that person who is a genuine risk to our community, and that person needs a different kind of structure support. So I hope that helps clarify something.
Yes, yeah, I couldn't tell what the origin of
Yeah.
that
And
problem.
then you had another question. You said.
Well, I did, but that took a while, so I don't wanna.
That was an excellent question, and we have time, so if you have another
Yeah,
question.
I guess the other question I had was in terms of the jail itself. It sounds like there are a lot of people you described as a backlog from the COVID era. And I got the impression that you expect that as those are brought to trial
Yeah.
or played out, that will tend to clear the jail
Yeah.
out and perhaps allow a little more capacity for some of the lower level offenders.
Yeah, and I think we want to be mindful. I am a big fan of what I call a one empty bed policy, and what that means is, in order for that to be a deterrence, there has to be the expectation that there's an empty jail bed there. So if we're at capacity, that deterrence goes away. And I've been doing this long enough where we had reached capacity before. And we also want to make sure that we're actually jailing the person who is a risk to our community, not somebody we dislike, not somebody who could benefit from structured support, right?
Mhm.
And it's important for us to, again, look at this in an honest way, because every single one of you in some capacity or another, talking to neighbors or talking to friends or watching something, there's this narrative that somehow in Salt Lake City or in Salt Lake County, crime is running amok. And okay, I am willing to accept that premise for the purposes of discussion, but let me put it in proper context for you, okay? So between 2021 and 2022, there was an increase in crime that happened in Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County's crime increased by 4%, okay? And in the city, it may have gone up by 8%. And that doesn't make me feel good because that's an increase that occurred. But in the same time, let's put it in its proper context, right? At the same time, in Utah County, crime rose by 34%. In Davis County, it rose by 17%, 12%. In Weber County by 17%. In Cache County by 38%, almost 40%, and in Tooele County by a whopping 66%. So while 4 to 8% is not acceptable, we are doing something fundamentally different that we did not see the same increase in our sister, same that they saw in sister jurisdiction. So 4% and 8% is not acceptable, but I have to believe that we have an infrastructure by which we are responding to crime. And I think we can never be not vigilant for violent offenders. And I think that's the important part of it. But for other things, we can be smart about it. We don't need to have a jail bed for somebody who really who's not a risk. They're a nuisance. So let's figure out what's doing that, and let's get the services around them. But I would much rather hold that empty jail bed for the murderer, the rapist, the child abuser, the domestic violent offender, the person who is engaging in assaultive behavior. And that's not to say that some of those Class B misdemeanors aren't assaultive behavior, But we have to work with the justice court to say, okay, when I do identify that person, I have to be able to have a capacity to hold that person because that person is being identified. Now you're just simply saying it's a class B sim, so let's not hold them. So when I give you the rationalization for it, and make me ask for the rationalization, they will give me the rationalization. My attorneys will give me the rationalization. So court, you have to trust me. I'm not going to bring you everybody. Look, all the other stuff that we're doing. But when I do ask for this person, there's a reason that why I want to be able to hold that, and I have to have an empty jail bed for that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
God, I'm just blown away by the amount of information that is going through me.
Well, I think this
I
is
love
this is one of the reasons I really, I mean, to your point, this is one of the reasons I really wanted to come down, because I really see you guys as the active agents in our community at community councils.
Mhm.
And you're taking the time and effort, and I'll be honest with you, I think we're doing something that is going to be very exciting, because I was at another meeting with a couple of other electeds. And they were like, where are you going? I go, well, I'm going to this community council meeting, and this is what we're doing over the next 12 months. And they just kind of stop and they go, well, can we go to us? I go, yes.
Yes, they can.
I think our citizens are hungry for that interaction
I agree.
because they've been neglected for far too long. And so let's open this dialogue, and that's our commitment. And so I will invite you all, because I know we're pressed for time, but I will invite you all every Friday. I set aside Friday, like tomorrow's Friday, I have 4 or 5 citizens who are coming to meet with me, right? And it gives us an opportunity to have that direct conversation, and we want to make ourselves available to you. We want to open this dialogue with you, and then hopefully as we finish that round, that we will then ask you to participate with us and say, hey, who are 2 or 3 people that you want to come down to a training, to a presentation at our office? And my goal is to bring actually people from all community councils there and to fill that room and say, this is what our community looks like. So what are your issues? What are your concerns? What can we help answer? And I want to create a forum for all our community council representatives to come at least once a year to that gathering and solicit those questions, and then invite other electeds to come down to be part of that conversation. So that's really why we're doing this, and we're building the framework for that.
That's great.
Wow.
It's good to
Okay.
hear. Okay.
I handle the scheduling for the citizen meetings, so I have some cards, so.
Can you say your name once again? Just so
Yeah,
everybody
my
can
name's
see?
Nick Pensari.
Yep. Hey, Nick.
So I'll leave my card, so if you wanna meet with Sim in our office, just feel free to reach out and I can get that scheduled for you.
And I'll put that information up in the chat before we're done. I just had a couple of comments that I wanted to make if there's no more questions in the room. First of all, one, we really appreciate you being here. We think this is a great thing, a great service to the community. I know that people here are just getting this special treatment by being able to ask really in-depth questions and connecting some dots that we don't generally get to connect. So really appreciate that. And we will spread this video widely, because I do think that, our attendance doesn't really speak to people's interest in this topic.
Sure.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Miami model.
Yeah.
And how much that is infiltrating into the city, and what we're seeing with the Homeless Resource Center amendments and things like this popping up. We have our land use advisor, Judy Short, online here. And it's something that we have Nick Norris, our planning director, talking about. Every single person who's working on the Homeless Resource Center, developing new legislation to cite homeless resource centers, are talking about the Miami model. And this continuity that's flowing through the city is something that I have never seen before. It's unprecedented. So we're just, hoping good things come from those connections that have been made for getting everyone in the same spot at the same time, looking at something new and creative. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then I have one more thing that I need to just bring up. I'm going to do a little plug here. That ELPCO has a lot of schools in our neighborhoods, most particularly East High School, which happens to be home to many, many, many students who come from as far away as 5,600 West every single day to attend school at East High School. Back 30 years ago, the voters decided to make our boundaries go west, east like this in order to
Diversify.
diversify the
student
populations, right? But a lot of times that has resulted in some segregation for many of these students that don't end up with the wraparound services they need around the school, basically in my front yard. And they don't do as well as we would like to see. A lot of those students coming from outside of our east neighborhoods fall through the cracks. So we started, or we actually just facilitated a youth-led youth advocacy organization, the West of East project. And we would very, very much like to thank the Salt Lake Police Department for helping us with the Promising Youth project that they put together. It's been developing over years, and they've accommodated many of the kids that go to school in our neighborhood to help keep them out of gangs, keep them safe. We started working with them in 2015, and it's been an incredible service. In addition to what's happening that Mr. Gill brought up earlier with the Hope camps. So many of the students that we've worked with have not had access to trauma-informed counseling and these concepts of emotional services. So the school district is really working on that, and they've been doing a good job in this trajectory. But it's these wraparound services that Mr. Gill's talking about, these different pieces of the puzzle that come together that really do serve our youth in ELPCO and those students who are coming from outside of ELPCO to go to school in our boundaries. So again, I just wanted to thank you guys.
Well, thank you for doing that, because that's an investment upfront that will pay us dividends downstream, right? And I think those are the paradigms that we have to engage in, both at a community level, at a local government level, and then stop looking to law enforcement and prosecution as the answer to that, because I don't have the exact stat, but it's like every $1 or $2 invested up front will save us like $20 to $25 on the back end. So in terms of even just as a pure fiscal business model, other than because it's morally and ethically the right thing to do, it is a smarter investment in a time when the resources are scarce, right? And again, let me just sort of reiterate, I am guardedly optimistic because I have a mayor at the city and I have a mayor at the county who is deeply committed to taking this approach. We also at the county have what we call the Criminal Justice Advisory Council, which we've had for almost 25 years, but we've really kind of emboldened that it is made up of not only community partners in the social services and the criminal justice system, but it has mayor's office represented, my office is there as leadership, and we are having those important conversations about physical health services, about affordable housing services, about mental health services, and how do we build that resiliency in the community. And what you were talking about is building resiliency. That is so important, especially because the research data shows us children have incredible neuroplasticity, and they are susceptible to those interventions at this age. 10 years from now, it becomes harder. 15 years from now, it becomes even more difficult to do that. And we're, so thank you for doing what you're doing. That's awesome.
Well, don't thank me,
Yeah.
because there's also, a lot of involvement from ELPCO residents. We happen to have wonderful teachers and principals that, that like Glendale feeds right into the East High area. So, some of those, the principal there and some of the educators there have been really helpful. The neighbors around the area who deal with a lot of issues from students over the years have worked really well together to help and to make sure that kids get what they needed from the school resource officers in the school. So moving on, because we have Josh Rabello here from the mayor's office, and we have to give a shout out to the mayor's office, because when we started the project way back in 2015, our mayor was not the mayor at that point, but we did get a lot of support services, and they continue to support us even now. So welcome, Josh. We're happy to have you. Thanks for being patient.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. So yes, my name is Josh Raboyo, Community Liaison in the Mayor's Office for District 5. I'll be quick here with my updates. I don't have too many as it is. I came in at the end of the fire department's presentation or update, but I believe I heard them talking about flooding issues, and just to reiterate that there are sandbags available for residents who are concerned about that issue on their property, outside their properties, at the public, I was gonna say public safety, public utility building, 1530 Southwest Temple. That's available for to pick up there during their business hours. Also, just another plug for the Salt Lake City mobile app. Please let me know, contact our office if you're having any issues with that app. I know I have gotten calls from residents and people in community councils who have had issues when they were submitting a request for either for graffiti removal, for pothole, for any number of issues that they're wanting to get an update on where it stands and when that request is going to be fulfilled. Feel free to reach out to us. I'm happy to take a look into those issues and encourage everyone to use it. Even if it doesn't feel like it does much, sometimes it really does help with the data gathering and looking at what's happening in the community. It's important it's an important resource. So just another plug for that. And then coming up on next month, April 22nd, I don't know if that's before or after our next meeting for this community council. April 22nd is a Saturday, that's Earth Day. The city is doing a big Jordan River cleanup day, and we're inviting everyone in the city that wants to volunteer to do so. You can go to stewardship.slc.gov, and that is the public lands website for volunteer opportunities, stewardship.slc.gov. Sign up for that Jordan River cleanup day, Saturday, April 22nd at 8 a.m. There's going to be a number of different projects you can do, both on the trail and on the river itself, and kayaks as it allows, as the conditions allow. Of course, with the rising water, that's another, and water flow levels, and that's something that will be kept in mind for safety of volunteers and everyone helping out with that. Encourage you to take a look at that opportunity. And then that, I believe, was the last of, the other thing briefly, yesterday, and Christina was there at the 900 South Reconstruction Open House. There was an open house event with the project consultants and engineers for the impacts that are going to be seen and already are being seen and going to continue to move east along 900 South. The reconstruction that moves on this year as the weather warms up and we go into the summer. Please reach out to the team, which is I had their contact info. I can put it in the chat, but there's an email address for inquiries into the project, questions about impacts, and there's also a hotline to call for any questions about the reconstruction. Those are also listed on the signs that you might see out there along 900 South, to say 900 South Reconstruction. There's a phone number on there that you can call, but that's also available for anyone that has questions about that. So that is all from my end. I'm going to put my contact info in the chat also there, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions here at the end if we have any.
Does anybody in the room have any questions? And I don't see anybody raising their hands out in Zoom, but I do have a follow-up. Josh, I talked to the people who are in charge of the 900 South Reconstruction today, because we did get a lot of requests on our Facebook page, well, a lot of questions about why we would schedule something like this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when most people are at work. And I reached out directly to the team immediately. They got back to me right away. And they said that unfortunately there were some problems scheduling a proper facility. They had a difficulty finding somewhere large enough this time of year in 9th and 9th. But as the project moves on and gets closer to construction in our area, that they'll be happy to set up a pop-up, a tent, table, things like that, to redo the open house where more people can attend, and that would be an evening event, so.
Great, that's great to hear.
And everybody can look on our Facebook page at this point. That is currently our website. So we do post everything that we feel like is critical information coming from ELPCO to the public that happens outside of our meetings on our Facebook page. So I want to take 1 second to introduce some people who are online tonight because the fire folks came so quickly that that we didn't get to say hi to our board members. We have Judy Short. She is ELPCO's land use advisor, and we would love to have her more often, but she also is the land use director at Sugar House Community Council. So Judy is really very, very busy, and but she is instrumental to teaching us all. I mean, we're all fairly new here in the ELPCO board about land use issues. So we would not be okay without Judy. So thank you, Judy. And we have David Jones, new to our board. We won't be able to see him, but hi, David. David is a board member at large, and he is currently not only helping us with bylaws and things like that, but he is working on the 11th East reconstruction project. So that's also very helpful. We have Marshall Bailey. He is a representative from East Liberty Park, which is the area right south of 9th and 9th. And then between 7th East and 11th East. And then we have Jeff Larson, and he represents the East Emerson area, which is up near 13th. Or between 1100 East and 1300 East, between 13 South and 17 South. So I think there was somebody else online, but I forgot to mention them earlier. But again, thanks to our board members. I have a couple of more.
Christina.
Yeah.
This is David. I just wanted to thank all our speakers tonight. It was really informative. Even though I wasn't able to attend in person, it was very, very good information. Thank you.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else from the board would like to say something tonight before we move on? And David, thank you for your comment. I don't hear from anyone. Okay, well, I want to introduce a couple of other folks in the room. We have Kimberly from NeighborWorks, and NeighborWorks is somebody that we're going to hear from a lot at our April meeting, which we're very excited about. So welcome, Kimberly. We also have online Jeanette Young. Jeanette, are you there? So ELPCO has been reaching out to the community to try and get prospective board members who are interested in joining us. And we have received applications from a couple of new people. Our bylaws state that in order to join our board, you have to have attended 3 previous meetings. So tonight we have Jeanette in on the Zoom call, and she is going to try and join our board and is attending the meeting tonight. Jeanette, do you want to tell us really quickly just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I have been living in East Liberty for just about 6 years. I've got a big background in volunteering. I've always been interested in, community organizing and, trying to be connected with where you live. But yeah, I have a background in design, a little bit of architecture, a little bit of qualitative research. So yeah, I'm just interested in being a part of this.
Great, thank you. Also in the room here, actually not in the room, in the hall, because unfortunately she has a very bad cough, is Alicia. Do you want to talk or you want to wait?
I can try.
Okay, she's going to give it a whirl. She's going to introduce herself really briefly. And do you?
The owl can see me.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't want to come closer and move everybody again. I'm so sorry. I'm recovering from bronchitis. And you wouldn't know it from the coughing, but I am recovering. So I'm Dr. Alicia Cunningham Bryan. I'm a professor at Westminster College. I'm an Egyptologist by training. I've lived in Salt Lake City for the last almost 7 years now, and all of that time here in the ELPCO area. I have a background in nonprofit board work. I've served as vice chair of the Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy previously. I'm currently vice chair of governance for the Utah Museum Association, and I'm on the board for the Utah Fulbright Association. I'm really committed to community service work and canvassing and building community and being out with people. Although again, when you're hacking and sounds terrible, not for the best. Hard to build connections when you sound like a plague victim. But I'm really excited to be here and to be meeting all of you. And I agree with David. This has been an incredible presentation. I listened from the corridor. It was incredible. So I really appreciate your time, all of you.
Great, thank you so much. So I just, again, want to thank our incredible presenters tonight. Really, really amazing to be able to ask questions and hear about these things in depth. It looks like that Josh jumped off real quick. He was going to join us, but at the last moment he had to divert his time otherwise or otherwhere. Whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. So if anybody has anything else to say, from the virtual group, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to shut down that part of the meeting now. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Good night.